You're listening to Just a Dude podcast with your host, Nathan. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Let's roll. Yo, what's good, everybody? Welcome to Just a Dude podcast, where real people share real stories that hit you right in the feels, or maybe just make you laugh a little. I'm your host, Nathan, and today we're diving into something that's really legit. How to take control of your life after college. Our guest is Brianne Rush, the mastermind behind the Independence Lab, and trust me, she's got the playbook for crushing it. From competitive dancer to magazine editor to marketing VP, Brianne's now helping women, and honestly us dudes too, build lives they're stoked about. So whether you're figuring out your next step or just trying to adult better, stick around. This one's for everybody. Let's get into it. Brianne, welcome to the show. I'm so glad that you're here, but I wanted to kind of start with your story and your background, because you were a competitive dancer, ended up in New York City chasing a magazine gig before your diploma was ever in hand. So a really unique background of the way that you got here, but please share with the audience a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, Nathan, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. I'm so excited to be here and share kind of an interesting story. All through my childhood, starting at like age 3, I was a dancer and came into competitive dancing. And it was never like something that my parents pushed on me. Both of my sisters danced a little bit and ended up going in different directions. It was just something that fueled me. And from that, I learned, self-expression, self-confidence, being on a stage, self-discipline, because you got to stick with it. I was in the studio
Yeah,
5 days a week, several hours, even as a child. So that was a huge part of who I was. And then when I was actually at home, something I really loved doing was writing. I would write in my journal. I made like a silly little newspaper for my family. And I always kind of knew those were my two passions. So I ended up going to college and getting a journalism degree. It was actually magazine journalism degree. And that's like so aging right now because most magazines.
yeah. I don't want to say it's aging, but yeah, it's funny.
Yeah.
I mean, the magazines are still out there, but I think a lot of us think of it being in print, which you don't
Yeah,
really see anymore.
exactly. And I actually did continue dancing through college as well. So
Nice.
when I graduated, it was like this big, beautiful mashup of my two passions. I ended up in New York City and I was working for Dance Spirit magazine, and the company that makes Dance Spirit, American Cheerleader, all of those magazines. I got to work there. So in combining my two
That's
passions.
awesome.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that was like such like a just a dream job for me, if you will.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then you transitioned to like marketing VP at Kuno Creative and founding the Independence Lab as well. So your journey doesn't really stop there, does it?
You're right. After a couple years of living my dream job, it just, kind of lost a little of its luster for me. I was living in New York, not making hardly any money. I missed my family. And then, just talking, as much as I loved dance, it was something that like, am I really going to be talking about this every day for the rest of my life? So I decided to make some changes and I moved back home to Ohio from New York City and ended up landing at a technology company, putting my journalism skills to use for a brand. So that's called content marketing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I worked there for about a year and then I was recruited to Kuno Creative, which is a digital marketing agency. And I've been there since. I built a content marketing department. And then I realized the skill sets that I used to build that department, I can actually apply across the company. So I was promoted to VP of operations. And that's where, I spend most of my time today as my day job. And I am helping to grow that company through marketing and sales and even actually hiring new people.
Well, that's awesome. And it's funny you said Ohio, so I'm an Ohioan myself, Brianne. So I currently am living in Ohio in the Akron area. So yeah, we've
We're not
we've
far away.
definitely breathed some of the same air, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm just outside of Cleveland, so we're not far at all.
Yeah, so we're like probably 40 minutes away from each other, so to speak. So awesome. But that's wild because I mean, you went into this and you had that great opportunity to mix your passion of dance with your passion of writing. But at some point, did it just feel like it was more of a job than the passion?
Yeah, it wasn't something that I could see myself doing long term. Like I was so thankful that I was there. I learned so much
Yeah.
from the job, made friends, and even since I was like 8 years old, I knew I wanted to move to New York City. And so I am so thankful for that experience. But, I think a lot of young people think, oh my gosh, when I pick my degree, when I pick my job, it's going to be this big decision that I have to stick with for the rest of my life. And that's just not true. You can change your job, your passions, your priorities, all those things might change and probably will. And that is okay. So, I love to share that with people. It's like you're not stuck somewhere career wise.
Yeah, and let me share because I was kind of similar to yours, where I started off my life in my adult career, so to speak. I was a police officer. I did that for 13 years, and I had a lot of opportunities. I did juvenile diversion, community policing, got to do a lot of community events and really interact with the community, and I loved that job. But in 2009, when the housing boom and all those problems, I got laid off, so I had to look for another opportunity because at that time I was like, hey, I'm a cop, I'll never be laid off, right? And then all of a sudden I was laid off. They got rid of the whole police department, but
My
I
gosh.
had to reinvent myself now in my 30s at that time and say, what am I going to do? So I decided to go back to school because I hadn't finished a degree. I ended up, working in hospitals for patient access, and then slowly divulged into information technology. And now a couple master's degrees later, and I'm working with a company that builds AI solutions for hospital systems. So it's
Amazing.
like I said, it's just because you start in one place doesn't mean you have to stay there. And I love the fact that you got an opportunity to really go after something you love. And that's what I say my police work was, because I loved it. I loved helping people. I loved working in the community. But then, we realized that at some point it probably wasn't for us or to continue doing that in the way that it was. And so we found another way. But you're absolutely right. You don't have to stick with the way you started. You can make changes. So I just wanted to throw that in there to kind of reemphasize what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I think it's so important to show that like it's not too late to learn any of these things. I love that you have
No.
incorporated AI and you're learning that. And I think everybody should be kind of a self-learner and make sure that they're developing the skill sets that they need to continue advancing in their careers. I love that you said that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're never too young and you're never too old to try something different. The worst thing that's going to happen is you might fail at it, but guess what? With failures, we learn a lot.
Oh yes.
Yeah. So the Independence Lab is something that you started. What's that all about? Can you give us kind of the elevator pitch on the Independence Lab?
Yeah. So really the elevator pitch is very much that I help young recent grads, ambitious grads to get clarity after college because there's such a plane of opportunity, but there's very little guidance. And so we focus on career, cash, and confidence, your work, your money, and your mindset to make sure that you have a strong foundation to enjoy the life that you will be living from that point of adulthood and forward.
Yeah, and that's awesome because you said that to help people that are coming out of college. And I think specifically you work with young women mostly. Is that correct? But this is
Yeah.
something that obviously everyone can learn from because even if you're, more working with women, we're all human beings. So things do apply to us all equally. But to help people, and we talked about this a little bit before we came on the air, to go from college to finding out really how to live life.
Mhm.
That's because I wish I had that, when I was younger, coming out of school and say, hey, now what do I do? Because a lot of people are like, hey, we give you all these classes, you learn all these different things, but nobody really comes to you and says, hey, here's how to look for a job, or here's how to, here's some of the things you could do to start a family or to do this or do that, And so I'm glad to hear that you started something that could help, with actionable strategies for people to really become, great parts of our society.
Yeah, it's a little bit overwhelming, right? You are now being kind of spit out into the world as an adult and you are expected to know what to do, but that's just not the case. I can remember, being out of school and having no idea necessarily how to interview for a job and
Hmm.
having no idea to how to read my paycheck or to budget appropriately or to save and invest. None of that was taught to me and I had to figure it out through trial and error quite a bit.
Yep.
And I'm happy to share some of those stories for sure. And really even like battling things when I say mindset, it's like that loneliness factor. If you do move to a new city or your friends move to a different city and you're in your hometown, there's a lot of loneliness. There's a lot of not understanding how to change your routines from when you're in college. You kind of go to class here or there, you sleep in. Now you have to wake up and go to your job every single day, So
And be on time, right?
yes, yes. And
That's
you're there
crazy. No.
8, 9 hours.
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's a lot of change all at once. So I remember being in that spot. And so that's really what I want to help people understand is how do you interview? How do you secure that job? How do you budget and make sure that you are setting yourself up to be wealthy in the future? And how do you make sure that your mental state stays healthy as well?
And I love that you added the mental state because I think, I think as a society here in the United States anyway, we're starting to finally realize that mental health is a big part of healthcare. And, we should be thinking more about our, mental state, our emotional intelligence, empathy, treating people how to work with other people and to see things from other people's views too, and not just be in our own bubbles. But I'm so glad that you put that in there because, mental health is a big thing that almost affects almost everybody nowadays. And I don't think we talk enough about it or hear other people deal with it. So it's nice that you brought that. I just wanted to call that out. So thank you for that, Brianne, because
Yeah,
we
absolutely.
don't
It's
talk about it
important.
enough. It
Yeah,
is.
it's important.
So what would you say your key pillars are for your program that you go through?
Yeah, so I mentioned, that career, cash, and confidence, and that's really where
Mhm.
I'm focusing. And the career portion of it is something that has been so clear, especially in the economic state that our country is in right now. So many people are having a hard time getting interviews, getting a job. And especially as recent grads, there's so many people with way more experience. How do you stand out, even for those entry level jobs? So that is like one of the main things that we talk about at the Independence Lab. The second one is how do you kind of budget, save, and invest your money because that information is out there, but how do we break it down for somebody who has just recently graduated?
Exactly.
Yeah. And then that last one is confidence. And we talk a lot about that. And to your point, the stuff that we do at the Independence Lab is focused on females because I feel like they often don't have the confidence that their male counterparts may have. But everybody can actually benefit from, what we're talking about
Yeah.
on all three pillars.
Yeah, absolutely, because those things affect any human being out there, regardless of where you live, right? You need those things. Your career, the money and yourself. You got to figure out who you are, and not just go through life checking boxes, right?
100%.
So I love that. And, it's really, you're teaching people to create a life and give them some knowledge of things that we didn't have when we were, coming through at their same age. But you're teaching them that really it's a life that's theirs. And so for you, what's the biggest hurdle that you see, for women making that jump from college to, a professional or even family? Because I have to assume that sometimes family might start right after college as well.
Sure. It's really, I think, this blind spot for emotional intelligence. And that's the biggest underlying or through line that we talk about at the Independence Lab. It's under all of those pillars that we covered. And I think that when you don't necessarily understand how to be aware and manage your own emotions, when you don't necessarily understand how to react well to others' emotions or, have the right conversations with people and understand how they're feeling using that empathy muscle, those are things that are going to affect you, whether it is a job interview or your everyday job or your budgeting and how you're utilizing your money, or even your own, mindset when you're trying to understand what you're feeling and why. So if you are not developing those emotional intelligence skills, that is the biggest blind spot for these people coming out of college because you were not taught that in college, right? You got your degree, you had your liberal arts that you had to make sure that you
Yep.
got to, that you're probably not going to use, but they didn't take the time to teach us how do we understand our own emotions? How do we understand the emotions of people that we work with? And how do we reflect on all of that and use it to our advantage?
Yeah, and that's amazing that you say it because we weren't talk about that. Empathy and emotional intelligence are two things that come up in the workplace, especially in, corporate America today, that they're pushing harder. And it's great that you're getting these young women and, maybe even men as they come out of college to help them understand what empathy is and to, kind of navigate the workplace dynamics because it is a dynamic in any workplace. When you have different people of different various backgrounds, which is a great thing, but different ideas, you have to learn how to navigate that and be empathetic, right, to different cultural backgrounds, different upbringings, different thought processes. So this is why I think this is great and why I wanted to have you on because we don't teach our young. I mean, we're so in the books, and I'm even thinking back to myself. If I go back to high school, like you said, the budgeting part.
Yeah.
There's no budgeting in school anymore. Like they used to teach you that, I think, as part of home ec way back in the day, but they don't even do that anymore. The only reason I got it was because I took an accounting class in high school, so I knew a little bit about budgeting. But if you didn't take that accounting class, you had to figure it out on your own.
Yeah. And I didn't take home ec or accounting.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Yeah, so if
like
you're
I
not
didn't
taking
get
these
any of
classes,
that.
yeah, and so, and that's one of the biggest things too is finding a budget is a huge thing to build you for success, or at least give you a good baseline, right? Because if you can understand how to budget money, where to put money appropriately, how to save, those types of things, that's gonna be one less thing you got to worry about in your life.
Oh yeah. It's 100% true. And for me, I kind of found that out the hard way. Like you said, like I actually didn't have that taught to me in school. Strangely enough, my dad is an accountant, but it's just not something we talked about at
Yeah.
home, right? So
Yeah, well, I mean, because
I
as a parent, why would you talk to your kids about your finances? You probably wouldn't, right? You don't want them to
right.
know how much, but
Yeah.
yeah, go
So
ahead.
I don't blame him at all, but like the point is now I'm, 22, 23 years old living in New York City and I have no idea what to do with my money except for that I don't have enough of it.
Especially in New York City, right? Coming from Ohio to New York, that had to be a
Yeah.
culture shock for you, just in pricing alone.
I'll share a funny tidbit. I had growing up, my grandparents always got us savings bonds for like our birthday or Christmas. And so when I got my internship in New York City, I was like, I've got my savings bonds. It was probably like around the $2,500 mark. And I was like, this is going to get me through my intern summer. No, that was like gone in like a week and a half.
Yeah,
It was
I can
gone.
imagine. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just, with any bigger populous city, things are going to be more expensive because there's more demand. It's usually harder to get things there, whatever it may be. But yeah, I cannot imagine how it would have been, growing up. Because did you grow up in Ohio, Brianne?
I did. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm from
So
like
growing up in Ohio, right? We're Midwesterners,
yep.
that's what they say. But we go to places like New York or Los Angeles, and we see some of the price, like for something simple, like let's just say a burger at a place, and it's like $10 more there than it is here, and you're like, oh my goodness, I'm never gonna survive.
Yeah. And I being completely honest, I was making so little money and I didn't know how to utilize the proper budget. And so I got myself into credit card debt when I lived there. And so
Sure.
that is, something I think a lot of people can relate to is they don't necessarily know how to budget. They find themselves in a situation where it's a little bit scary money wise. They maybe don't know how to manage their credit score or even check it. And so what I ended up doing is like really, and this was a little bit later, but really, really digging in and teaching myself through reading books and listening to podcasts. I had to really teach myself that personal finance side, but you have to want to do that
You
sometimes.
do.
Yeah, and it's always super easy to get started, but once you're in it and you understand the vocabulary, it becomes a lot easier and then you can apply that a little bit at a time. You don't have to be making six figures to be
No,
saving
you
for
don't. Definitely
retirement.
don't. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Because for years, especially on a cop salary, I could tell you I was able to save some money, but it was not a lot. So looking back, you sit there and you say, "Boy, how did I even save any money?" But yeah, you're absolutely right. You don't have to be a millionaire to do this stuff. It can work for everybody. You can start in small chunks. Maybe just start with a register and tracking the money that you're spending, and then go from there and say, "Okay, what are the bills that I have every month? Okay, let's list these out so I know that I have to put money aside for those." It's just a simple, easy steps that can get people that were just never really taught. And I just love that you took that initiative to help, young women kind of bridge that gap between college and life.
yeah, the information is out there, but it's overwhelming and where to find it. And so if I can boil it down and say, this is for you, this is the information that you need at this point right now in your life, and you don't need to worry about this other stuff just yet, I think that's super helpful. So to your point, things like just budgeting your money, understanding the 50-30-20 rule,
Hmm.
50% is for your fixed bills and rent and things like that. 30% is for maybe having some clothing and food and the things that you need but are like kind of
A little bit
expendable.
more
And
discretionary. Yeah.
yeah, and then the 20% you should be trying to put that much towards your high interest debt Oops.
Yep.
Or, saving, putting in your 401k or IRA. So those are the numbers that you can just start with, that 50-30-20 rule.
Yep, I love that. And I know you mentioned like when you were in New York about credit cards, so I wanted to offer a quick warning to folks. Credit cards are so easy to use and sometimes get to, depending on your credit. But like you said, a lot of us when we use credit cards, we'll use them just to try to, balance things out. But next thing the 10, 20, $30 charges start adding up. And next thing you know, you're like thousands in debt. You're like, wait, what happened? So, that's my word of caution to our listeners. I don't have anything against credit cards, but make sure that you're not using them to live on. They should really be for, if you're gonna, like what I use a credit card for is I'll pay bills with a credit card and then get the points, but then pay the credit card right off, So I do things like that just to, take a little advantage of them because I'm sure they've taken quite a bit of me over the years. But yeah, you don't want to live off a credit card for sure. That can really cause you some downfalls in the future. But yeah, that's great. Brianne, what is something that, what is a tip that you would give for, financial literacy that anyone can use, dude or not?
Yeah, I think really taking the time, maybe over 2 weeks or a month, to track your spending. And this goes back to that emotional intelligence idea that we were talking about. Track your spending, and just all you have to do is write down what you bought and then put it in one of two columns. This was a necessary purchase, food, whatever it is,
Hmm.
or this was an emotional purchase. I was feeling lonely. I was feeling sad. I was feeling super happy and celebratory. So I went out and I bought new clothes, new shoes, new purse, new whatever,
Right.
put it into one of those two columns, either needed it or emotional purchase, and then just look at it and see where you land. Is most of your spending in that fixed column that you needed to spend it, or was most of it kind of in that emotional column? And now you can really see why you're out of money, at week 3 out of week 4 of the month. So that's just really step one, is just being aware of your spending, being aware of your emotions. That's first step of emotional intelligence, and you can apply it very easily to your finances.
Yeah, I love that. And that's such an easy tip, like, to wrap your mind around that. You're like, wow, something so simple can't be that impactful, but yet it can. And I love
Mhm.
that the fact that you say, is this, and I like the way you put it. Is it, was it something I needed or was it an emotional purchase? And a lot of us will say, is it a need or a want? But you're right. A want is an emotional purchase. And I love the way that you put that out there.
And you can even add a third column and say, what was the emotion I felt when I bought
Yeah,
this?
I love it
Was
because
I
then you
sad?
start getting in touch with yourself. Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah. And so I guess I want to ask the same question for, career growth. What's something that you would give someone coming out of college? What's a good tip for them as far as growing their career?
The tip is to build your emotional intelligence. However, it's a little bit, abstract. So let me tell you like a quick story. My very first interview out of college, I am on the phone with this company I talked about, where I landed my dream internship with the magazines. So this woman is interviewing me, and it's my very first interview. I thought I had prepared well, but
Hmm.
turns out I hadn't. And she asked me this question that I did not know the answer to. Did not know it. And I felt myself starting to panic, right? You're just like, oh gosh, what do I say? What do I say? What do I do? And I'm starting to spiral. But then I take a deep breath and I ask her, can we come back to this question? She says, okay. So we go on with this interview. I answer the question she has very slyly because this is a phone interview, do a quick Google. And I, at the end of the interview, say, can we go back to that question? I'm ready to answer it now. I give her the answer. We hang up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I completely bombed this interview. No way I'm getting this job, right? Like, super sad. Well, what it turns out is the woman who was interviewing me thought that I handled myself so well that she actually created an internship for me. And so that is a really good example. I didn't know it at the time what it was called, but of self regulation. So instead of panicking and going down that, rabbit hole of like, this is just done, I managed my emotions and came up with a solution and appeared like I had it together, appeared, like I had very good self control. I managed my nerves very well. And that landed me that role in New York City that was just like absolutely dreamworthy. So, what that emotional intelligence means, how do you build that? It means understand your emotions, understand what triggers you, understand what makes you nervous, how you react to it, understand that, and then figure out how you can manage that, how you can regulate that. And that's going to apply to when you are networking. It's going to apply when you are in job interviews. It's going to apply when you're asking for a raise once you get that job. It's going to apply in all of those high risk situations, and you are going to come out better on the other side. You are going to get that interview. You are going to get that job. You're going to get that raise and that promotion. So, understanding yourself and how you can manage your emotions, start working on that.
Yeah, that's amazing. I wish I would have had that information, 20, 30 years ago when I started working because, I was in a profession where you had to make quick decisions, right, as a police officer. And then when I transitioned into tech, I kept thinking you got to make a quick decision. When in reality, you can take a moment, right? In real life,
Mhm.
in most jobs, you could take a moment and say, hey, you know what? Let me think about that and let me come back to it. Just like you did in your interview, right? If you felt like you were rambling, you knew you were going down probably a rabbit hole that you didn't want to go down, but you said, hey, you know what? Can we come back to this? And I've found that even in regular everyday things with work, like whether someone comes at you and maybe it feels like a personal attack or something like that, if you could just say, hey, you know what, let me think about this for a minute and let me come back to you so you could cool down or just really think about it, get your head wrapped around it. There's nothing wrong with doing that. And I love the fact that you did that in your interview and you see how well it worked for you.
Yeah, I mean, that one moment completely changed my life, just taking that moment and asking for what I needed. So I would highly encourage people to have the confidence to do that, to ask for what you need in the moment.
Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic because like I said, I think that that's something that all of us could probably have used when we first came into the job market specifically. So for the folks that come with you into your program or start working with you, how long do you usually work with them?
Everything that we do because of this group, they don't have a lot of money. Everything to them is absolutely free. So they are able to come in, and it's simply a newsletter that goes out once a week where they are getting these types of tips and stories to apply to their life. And then they can use any of the resources on the website as well. So we have things like a 401k guide. We have things that help them work through like the emotional wellness side, myths and things like that that they can help overcome for their mindset, and then interview guides, things like that. So everything is free to them so they can use it for as long as they need it.
Awesome. And, so we don't leave out because I know we talked about the financial side and job growth, but we have touched quite a bit about, emotional intelligence and self care. And, I see that on your website. But why is that, for those people listening? Because a lot of times I think people think that emotional intelligence or self care are like buzzwords, but I know that they're not buzzwords. So why does that matter when we're chasing a career or an adult life?
Yeah, I think especially at this age group or this time in your life when you're making such a huge transition, it's very easy to overthink. It's very easy to become anxious, and it's very easy to become lonely. And so those three things are pretty much a recipe for disaster, right? If you are suffering from one or more of those things in your life, it's going to be very difficult for you to grow the confidence to stand out in the job market or to have the confidence to make sure your finances are the way that they should be. So that's why it's so important. Now, how do you do that? There's obviously different things that work for different people, but we do talk a lot about just spending time reflecting and being aware. For me personally, I meditate every morning. It doesn't take more than 10 minutes, but it's something that I find really soothing and like I've come up with so many good ideas during that time, but also just been able to relax myself so I'm no longer feeling anxious or overthinking things in the moment. And so it doesn't have to be meditating if that's not really something that's for you. It could be just making sure that you go for a walk once a day, 10 minutes,
It's
making
That's
sure you
exactly what
have.
I was gonna say, Brianne, because I was like, one thing, especially if I start feeling overwhelmed and I don't, have a meeting or something coming up, I'll say, you know what, I'm gonna take 10 minutes, just go walk around the block or something and just come back, just clear your head. Or, like you said, you have a daily tradition. I start my days off generally with a cup of coffee because I can't live without it. But then I'll read like some devotional things, little things that I can kind of reflect on throughout the day is, usually it's about my religion or what I believe, but it helps just get me in the right mindset to start that day and just really start with the best opportunity in my, the best weapon in my pocket to get me through that day.
Yeah, the gratitude, things like that, it builds confidence. So we do talk through different ways that may you be able to apply, whatever works for you, whether it
Hmm.
is like
Yeah.
gratitude practice, meditation, walks, whatever it is that you can apply and why that's important.
And it's something we overlook so much because we're in such a fast-paced world nowadays, especially with us being connected all the time. I mean, look, we're doing a podcast from, well, actually 40 minutes away probably, but we're doing a podcast remotely that we could have never done before, but we're just so connected. I think that's important too, just that I wanted to throw out there too, is sometimes we just need to disconnect a little bit and just, like you said, just take some deep breaths, maybe sit out on a back porch or something, look at the trees, the birds, whatever, just disconnect from everything. Because I know, especially when you're coming from college, you want to make a name for yourself, you want to keep going, but you have to make that time for yourself too.
Yes, if you don't, you will absolutely burn out. And I know that that word might be a little bit buzzwordy right now, but it is
It's
true and it
true.
does happen. I think it did
Yep.
happen to me, and that's why I ended up leaving New York. And so it is so important to take care of yourself.
Yeah, and I've had the same thing happen to me. I managed over 100 people and it had really no help in managing those folks, and it burned me out quick. A year, I was done. So it's like you got to watch about those too. Be careful what you wish for. I always wanted to manage a lot of people to try to help the most people that I could in the work that we did. And then I found out I really didn't want to do that. I like
That's a
helping
lot of
people,
people
but
to manage.
that's a lot of people that are just relying on one person. Well, Brianne, I have a little section. I want to switch gears for just a little bit. This is a section for our listeners to get to know you a little bit, but I call it Dude Q&A. Just a couple of quick, no-brainer questions, but fast answers, no overthinking. I'll give you an example of how easy this is. Coffee or tea?
Okay.
Which do you prefer?
Coffee, for sure.
All right. Now, are you a hot coffee or cold coffee?
I'm a hot coffee, kind of like, it's like part of my meditation, just like, this feels good.
Good. I see we've got that in common. I love it. I love it. My wife is more of a cold coffee person. I can't drink cold coffee. I don't know what it is. So it's just weird.
Yeah, I
But
will in the summer, but it's not like my go-to.
not your go-to. I love it. All right. Worst job you ever had?
I think it was at the tech company where I started content marketing only because it was a tech company, but they were just like behind the times. They were like, I was working on print brochures and I was like, what is happening here?
Exact. It is so funny that people think, hey, you're a tech company, so you're got all the coolest and most advanced stuff, and then half the companies you work for are on systems that are like 40 years out of date.
Yeah.
It is funny,
Yes,
but
it was
yeah.
ridiculous.
One song that you would blast to hype yourself up.
Anything Lizzo. Probably not for your
Okay.
audience, but sorry.
No, that Lizzo's fine. Yeah, absolutely. Biggest pet peeve in the workplace.
Oh, you know what I hate? I hate when people don't stick with the same channel. And what I mean by that is if I send you an email with a question or something I need, and then you chat me, I don't like that. Just reply back to my email. I need that.
Yeah.
I need that. It's this one channel.
I've never thought about that, but you're absolutely right. If I send you, because people do that I've worked with too, like you send an email, just, maybe you want a paper trail or something, or you need one. I mean, some of the stuff that I do, you have to have a paper trail for it, especially with healthcare. But I'm like, then they hit you back like through Slack or a Teams message, and you're like, no, no, just answer the way I
Yeah,
sent it to you. I love it. I'm with you
it's
100%.
my biggest pet peeve.
All right. If you weren't doing this, what would be your new dream gig?
Oh my gosh. I watch a lot of HGTV, so probably interior designing, and that's part of
Nice.
why I have Healthy Home as part of my Independence Lab. That's
Yeah, I love that. I have a friend of mine that I went to high school with. She does some interior remodeling or redecorating. I think it's her company's called Rhine Revisions, but she does some great social media stuff with just little things. She's like, I got this thing for $10 off of Facebook Marketplace, and now it's like a $400, I don't know, chandelier or something. But she's pretty handy, so I could get behind that. If my hands worked like my mind did, I would love to do that. But it all works out in here, and then when I get these things involved, it just goes to heck. Awesome.
yeah,
Well,
just
that
like the
was it. That was yeah. Hopefully, that was pretty easy. Yeah, that was so
Mhm.
pretty quick. Dude, Q&A, get to know you a little bit, but I know we've been talking for a little bit. What is one thing if for folks listening to our show, what is one thing that you would want them to know about you or the lab that you've got going on that for them so they could help them out and maybe push them your way?
Yeah, so for daily updates, I am on TikTok, so you can follow me there. It's at Brianne Independence Lab, so BRIANNE Independence Lab. I do daily updates there, but For your audience, Nathan, I do have a playbook because some of this emotional intelligence stuff is very abstract.
Hmm.
So I am willing to absolutely give that away for free, that information. So if you go to theindependencelab.com/playbook, you will find that there and you can get it for absolutely free. It's got a breakdown of steps that you can use to improve your emotional intelligence. It actually has that tracker that we talked about for budgeting,
Oh,
journal
nice.
prompts, and a lot more. So go ahead there and find that.
Excellent. So, for our listeners, because I know we've talked about emotional intelligence a little bit, can you kind of give an example, just for those maybe listeners that don't know, or maybe they've heard the word but don't really understand it? Kind of what an example of emotional intelligence is.
Yeah, so it's actually broken down by Daniel Goleman in his book in kind of five big buckets. So there's self-awareness, and that's just really kind of what we've been talking about this whole time is
Hmm.
how do you identify your own emotions? And self-regulation is the second bucket. So now that you know what your emotions are, how do you regulate those? It's kind of how we talked about in that interview. And then
Hmm.
we've got communication. This is a huge way that you can stand out in the job market. People are not good
Absolutely.
communicators,
No,
believe
they're
it or not.
not.
So when it comes to customer facing roles, client facing roles, anything where you're going to be interacting with other people outside of the company, if you can communicate well, companies need people like you. So
Yep.
showcase that, or if you're not great at it, practice, get better because that's a way that you can get a job. So bucket three is that communication. Bucket number four, it kind of goes hand in hand with everything. It's empathy. So, when somebody else is having a reaction that is, a little emotional or maybe not the best, behavior at work, you can understand, you can put yourself in their shoes and understand why they might be reacting that way. And it makes the conversation progress past, now we're at this
Yep.
gridlock. And so
Yeah,
that
the
empathy.
old butting heads, right? Yeah, we can get
Mhm.
past that, and maybe it's
Yep.
some good constructive dialogue instead of
Yeah.
destructive dialogue, right?
Oh, yeah, exactly. So empathy is four, and then bucket five is actually your motivation. So putting your head down and learning things, being a self learner, bringing curiosity to the table. I actually interview people now and hire them, and I love when people are coming and they are curious. They are putting that on display during their interview. I am
Yep.
so much more likely to hire somebody who brings that sort of energy to the table where they are curious to learn and get better. That I always love that. So if you can bring that to the table, that motivation to improve yourself, that's going to take you pretty far as well.
Brianne, that tip right there is a huge tip because I'm the same way as you. I used to interview obviously for, positions and stuff
Mhm.
within my departments. And I used to always love, I'd get really jacked up on, candidates that would come and ask questions,
Yes.
because how many times do we go into an interview? And for those of you that maybe have never had an interview, generally you go in, the interviewee or the hiring manager, whoever it may be, will ask you a bunch of generally standard questions, I guess I'd say. Occasionally there'll be some new ones in there you've never heard before, but they're generally about the same. But what happens is they're always going to give you an opportunity to say, "Hey, do you have any questions?" I always tell you, you'd better not go to that interview and say no. There should be at least one question that you come with.
Oh, yes. You need to ask a question. You need to have that prepared for sure. And the other thing that you can do is just showcase how you want to get better in that role. Sure, we need
Yep.
somebody who's going to come and, check the boxes and do their job, but we also want somebody who's going to come and learn things. And like what you talked about earlier, how can you apply AI to this role? It's not built out into the process yet. How can
Right?
you put your stamp on it and apply that and just grow? That's just one example, but like that's what I want to see is that curiosity, that confidence. It's going to take you further than your just credentials on paper.
Yeah, and it almost shows the drive that an individual has. Number one, not just showing up prepared. You should always show up prepared for an interview, but having questions out there that you want to ask, whether it be about the company or about the position, and then having some things where you could say, "Yes, I understand, and I can meet the minimum
Mhm.
requirements." But what I want to do, right, is what I would love to do as I learn the job is to take it to the next level.
Yes.
That's what we're looking for in interviews. I mean, really, anybody can come and say, "Hey, I can do the job," right? But can you do the job and make the job better? That's what I always say to everyone.
Yeah,
You
that's
right?
exactly right. That's the
Put
person
your
I want to
stamp
hire.
on it. Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. let's put your stamp. We hire you for a reason because you have great individual ideas that can help us that we may have never thought about. So please, please bring those ideas.
Yes.
Please.
Well said.
Well, that's great, and thank you for giving us that deep dive into what emotional intelligence is, because I think a lot of us talk about it, but we forget to tell people what the baseline of it or what we're talking about when we mean emotional intelligence. So yes, thank you for that, Brianne.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for our listeners, if they come to the Independence Lab, what is your ideally, number one, what type of person are you looking for? And I don't mean necessarily looking for, but what type of person do you think this would be for? And then number two, if they, come through and learn some things, what do you hope the outcomes would be for these folks?
Yeah. The ideal person is really just an ambitious recent grad who's looking for some sort of clarity in their life. So if you fit into any part of that scenario, then this is for you. And what I'm hoping for is that people just get the information that they need and the stories that they need from either my experience, or I interview other successful women to understand that you are not alone in this. You are not the first person to feel this way. And everybody has experienced this at some time or another. And so that gives you the baseline to start applying what we're teaching, right? So now you
Yep.
understand how to grow in your career. You understand how to manage your finances and how to ensure that your mindset stays in a healthy state. Those are the three things that I'm really hoping that people walk away with.
Yeah, excellent. And from, everything that I've seen on the website and some of the tools and stuff, like I said, I wish I had this, when I came out of college 20 years ago, because I'd probably be a lot further in life than I am right now. And, because we had to blunder through these things, right? And I say blunder because, I don't know, for some reason, I never asked anybody, hey, how do you do this? Or, hey, you just kind of fumble through it until it works, but now
Mhm.
you've got some opportunities. You've got the guides, the tips, everything on the website that can help people learn, how to improve their emotional intelligence, how to improve their financial way of life, and how to grow their career. And so, thank you for that, because again, like I said, and I know I've said it over and over again, but it's just not something that we ever think about, but it is definitely something that we need.
Oh yeah. I think I wanted it when I was coming out of college. So I'm so grateful that I'm in a spot now where I'm able to provide that. And I do hope that it is helpful for them.
Yeah, me too, because I know, myself being a little bit older now, I know how much this would have helped me. So hopefully, folks out there listening, they're a little bit younger, especially if you're just coming out of college, don't go the path I went. Here's a great tool for you at theindependencelab.com, where you can get some information to help put you on the right way. You don't have to fumble through it like the rest of us did. So, Brianne, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. Is there anything that you want to leave the audience with? Any last words, so to speak?
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway here is just remembering that emotional intelligence outranks expertise. So the more that you can be in touch with that side of your emotions and your communication skills and your empathy skills, it is going to take you much further than whatever you're putting down on your resume.
Absolutely. I mean, that's truth couldn't be spoken any clearer than that. You're
Well,
absolutely right, because you can know everything in the world, but if you're a jerk, you're not going to get very far, right? And so,
totally agree with that. I don't want to hire jerks.
no, exactly. None of us do, and none of us want to work with a jerk. So, you know, but no, Brianne, thank you so much for bringing this information, for seeing this need and really filling it, and allowing me to be a part of your journey to help spread the word, get this out there to everybody who may need it. Because, like I said, again, this is something we overlook so often in our society, specifically here in the U.S. I'm sure probably all over the world. But this is a great opportunity for, if you're not sure what to do out after college, you're getting to the end, or maybe you've just gotten out, go out and check out theindependencelab.com. They've got a bunch of information there. You can get in touch with Brianne if you need to. Also, Brianne's information is going to be on my website, justadudepodcast.com. So if you go to justadudepodcast.com, you'll see a picture of Brianne there. All her links, social media, everything will be there as well, too. So, Brianne, again, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about before we depart?
I think we covered it, Nathan, and I just want to say thank you so much for having me on. I so appreciate it.
Wow, Brianne, you dropped some serious gems today. I want to thank you for bringing the heat. Folks, if you're ready to level up your career, your money game, or adjust your whole vibe, head over to theindependencelab.com for all the good stuff, tips, guides, and Brianne's blueprint for owning your own life. Big thanks to you, Brianne, and to all of our listeners for hanging out with us. Whether you're fresh out of college or just navigating this wild thing called life, keep being a dude or dudette, living it your way. I'm Nathan with Just a Dude Podcast. I'll see you on the next episode.